Michael, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, James. Good
International Cannabis Corp is the only licensed producer of cannabis in Uruguay, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, actually, there are two recreational cannabis licenses in Uruguay, and ICC Labs is one of the two. But we are the only one that's listed on a stock exchange. And in fact, we're actually the only South American licensed producer listed on a stock exchange anywhere in the world.
Okay. How much cannabis do you produce? What's the sort of footprint look like?
So we have two business segments, one for the recreational market domestically in Uruguay, and we have a quota for 2 tons per year, but we have run rate production of about 4 to 5 tons this year. So as the domestic market expands, we expect our license to expand to meet the Uruguayan demand. That being said, we also have a second business segment, which is our medical cannabis segment. We have over 550 acres of licensed hemp for CBD production in Uruguay, which is a tremendous land package if you look at Canadian peers. And so we also have that license as well. So there's kind of two different regimes, one domestic and then one really meant for CBD export.
Wow, so is 550 acres, is it under cultivation? Is it a greenhouse? Is it an enclosed space?
Sure. So we have a small half-acre greenhouse that we used for research and testing purposes, and we've already gone through 2 growth cycles there. We've planted just about 69 acres of outdoor hemp production, which will come to be full grown at the end of April, and we'll start extraction shortly thereafter in May. And so if you can imagine, 68, 69 acres of production, we're going to have a significant amount of CBD dry flower from which we can extract into oils, extract into a pure CBD extract form. This will be outdoor.
Outdoor?
100% outdoor, produced with GAP certified standard operating procedures.
Right. And
then we're building a GMP certified pharmaceutical grade extraction lab in Uruguay, the first of its kind in a free trade science zone in Uruguay. So anything that we import or export out of that zone is on a tax-free basis, which is a huge competitive advantage for us compared to international firms.
So what's the domestic market worth in terms of size?
Sure. So recreationally, if you look at Uruguay, it's about 3.1 million people compared to Canada, which is 35 million. And the way we like to look at it is if you compare on a population basis, Canada with probably close to 100 licensed producers and 35 million in population, Uruguay is 3.1 million people and only 2 licensed producers. So even on the domestic basis, if you exclude the export potential, Uruguay it's pretty meaningful numbers.
The economics appear to be attractive superficially.
Yeah,
anyways.
Absolutely.
So on the export side, you're growing a much bigger footprint for export, and I do recall seeing that you had executed an agreement with a Canadian LP to import extracts from your operation. Now, is that something that can occur with international laws and the condition they're in right now?
It's a really good question. At the beginning of last year, we struck a deal with Emblem, which is a Canadian licensed producer, and we really like the team there. Very good cultivation team. Basically, their facility in Paris, Ontario, was led by a guy named Max Zavit, who we struck a deal with and really have a really good relationship with them. Under the current Canadian ACMPR regime, there actually is a pathway, a regulatory pathway to allow importation.
Oh, okay,
and it's for medical and scientific purposes. And so under that track, we can actually export from Uruguay CBD dry flower. And that was one of the relationships that we've struck on the export side. We've also struck a deal with Nuvera, which is formerly a licensed dealer named Avanti. And if you've been following it, they were recently acquired by Afria.
Yeah.
And so under that relationship, we're looking to export CBD crystal or CBD oils under a separate regulatory regime not governed by Health Canada. So those are the 2 main Canadian commercial relationships we have for import into Canada. We also have pre-sale agreements in Mexico and Brazil with 2 pharmaceutical chains. In Mexico, the agreement calls for 120,000 30 milliliter bottles of CBD oil. And in Brazil, it's for 180,000 30 milliliter bottles of CBD oil. So, initially ICC's mandate was, well, Uruguay, from a regulatory perspective, far ahead of Canada. I mean, they had a recreational regime in 2017, right?
Right.
And so we looked at it as, well, if they're going to be first mover from a regulatory basis, then obviously places like Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, in South America, which have had absolutely no movement in terms of local domestic cultivation, then really that's our opportunity. And those were largely the relationships we're looking at, and largely the market that we're trying to capture.
Well, that's fascinating. So at this point, do you have a sense of the sort of the margin you're going to earn from your exports into Brazil? So
if you look from a cultivation perspective on our industrial hemp product, we're probably going to be producing at probably south of 10 cents per gram on CBD dry flower. What that'll materialize in an end product, we're still in the production phase, so it's a bit unclear. But you're looking for those 30 milliliter bottles that I was talking about. You're looking at a retail value anywhere from $40 US to $200 US in the international market. So the margins are substantial, and being able to grow outdoors, having things like low-cost labor, a very skilled labor force in Uruguay, because it's largely an agricultural country. Energy is cheaper, water is cheaper. So all of these things factor into our production profile and really give us a competitive advantage when you're looking globally.
Right. All right, that's great, Mike. Well, let's leave it there. We'll come back to you in a quarter's time or something and see how you're making out. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.